This module will introduce the ABAP debugger, and we'll go step by step through some of the main tools we can use to ensure our programs function as we intend them to. And we will also see how we can highlight bugs within our program that are not captured by the syntax checker. So the first thing we're going to do is load up a program that we have used previously that accesses the database table we created containing employee records. So the program we'll use is Z Employee List 01. So we'll just go into the program itself and have a look at the code so we are familiar with the logic that we want to debug. So the program basically reads data from a table called Z Employees, and we have multiple select statements that act as loops. So it'll read the first record, write out the record to the screen, then end the loop, and it'll keep going round until all the records are being read and output to the screen from that table. Underline, then it does the loop again, underline, loop again, with some slightly different output to the screen by introducing new lines, and so on. Step back just to the main screen of SE38. And we can start debugging this program in a number of ways. And the first way we'll see is we have an option here on this toolbar called Debugging, which is Shift F5. As long as we have the program in the program input box, we can click the debugging window and it will take us into a debugging session at the first line of code within our program. Here we go, we've entered the debugger and you can see we have a blue arrow pointing at the report statement, and that's the first line of code within our program. Now I'll step back and show you an alternative way of debugging. If we go and look at the code itself, now we have the option of setting what are called breakpoints on our code. And we'll come to breakpoints very shortly, but for now I'll just set one. So I'm going to place my cursor on a line of code and click this stop icon. And that will set a breakpoint on this line of code, which will force the program to stop executing our code and take us directly into a debugging session. So if we execute the program, you'll see it's very fast. The program started to execute, and then as soon as it got down to the line of code where we set a breakpoint, the debugging session kicked in, and we have the blue arrow identifying the line of code that we can start debugging from. And I'll say this is actually my preferred way of debugging a program, because more often than not, you don't want to start at the very start of your program. You have a good idea of where the issues are, so you'll normally set a breakpoint, let the program zoom through to it, and then start debugging line by line from that point on. Now I briefly mentioned breakpoints there, and I'll just explain there are two types of breakpoints that you can set in your program. Static breakpoints, which we will come to in a little while, and dynamic breakpoints, and that is what I set just there. An important point to keep in mind about dynamic breakpoints is that they are only valid for the current session. So if you come out of your SAP GUI, then go back in at a later date, your breakpoint will no longer exist. I'll just step back to the program. I'll just mention there is another way of setting a breakpoint, and that's within your debugging session itself. You can just double click on any statement and a breakpoint will be set. So for example, I'll just double click here and you'll see a breakpoint is set. To remove your breakpoint, just double click the stop sign and it's gone.